we found this very interesting bunch of pro Johnny Depp Twitter accounts online. And they're tweeting today. You can see that they tweet 20 times a day about Johnny Depp. They got pictures of Johnny Depp everywhere. They hate Amber Heard, pretty standard for Johnny Depp fans, except that if you plug in their details into the Wayback Machine, which is an internet website that kind of saves old copies of web pages, you can see that they've deleted hundreds of other tweets, and those tweets are all in Arabic, not English, and they don't have anything to do with Depp or any other celebrity. They're all praising Saudi Arabia or its ruler, Mohammed bin Salman.
Can you start off, Lexi, by just reminding us of the sequence of court cases between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard?
Sure, yeah. So there were two main court cases, one in London and one in Virginia in the US. The one in London was in 2020, and it was the first case. It actually wasn't Depp v. Heard in that case. It was Depp versus the Sun newspaper or news group, the Sun's owner. And the Sun had published a piece that basically called Depp a wife beater. And Depp sued the Sun under defamation laws. That trial happened in London in 2020, and a judge ruled in favor of the Sun, and in a very kind of considered judgment found that on the balance of probabilities, Johnny Depp had abused his former wife Amber Heard on 12 separate occasions. So big loss for Johnny Depp in 2020 in London. But then at the same time as that was going on, Johnny Depp was suing Amber Heard directly in the US. This was because she wrote a comment piece for the Washington Post where she described herself as a spokeswoman for domestic violence, but she didn't name Depp. Nonetheless, Depp said that this clearly referred to him, and he took her to court. And that jury trial took place in the spring of 2022, and that was the big event that was kind of everywhere on all our social media. And Johnny Depp ended up winning that case because the jury decided that he had been defamed by Amber, that Amber was basically making it up.
How much online activity was there around Amber Heard and Johnny Depp in the UK court case?
There was a significant amount of online activity even back then. So, if you speak to Amber's lawyer, Jen Robinson, if you speak to other media commentators and legal commentators like Mark Stevens, they will tell you at the time when they were kind of in the thick of it in the UK case, they were getting trolled a lot online.
But was there any suggestion with the evidence that you then went on to collect that there was some, do you call it inauthentic activity?
Yeah, so like inauthentic activity we're using as a kind of umbrella term to mean something that isn't organic, something that isn't real on social media. So it can be like a bot, which is a totally automated account, or it can be like a paid-for troll who is a human that's sort of paid to pretend to be someone they're not. So yeah, in terms of... Sorry, what was the question?
So I suppose what I'm trying to get at is whether or not the very first time all of this goes to court, there is evidence that something else is happening around these two people, where it's not me reading a newspaper going, oh, I think I'm going to post something about him or about her. It's something else.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there were definitely signs back then that there was something weird going on. Like there was a lot of tweeting from accounts that had only just been set up, or accounts that only tweeted about Johnny Depp and that's all they'd ever done. And people commented on it at the time, but that wasn't the focus of the case. So no one, the news group and their lawyers didn't really put a lot of effort into working out if there were bots or not, because they didn't have to. All they had to do was to prove, as a matter of fact, that Depp had abused her. So the issue sort of rumbled away in the background until the US case. And then in the US case, Amber's lawyers went a step further, and they did accuse Depp of mounting a global bot campaign against Amber Heard. But the claim itself was a little bit rushed. I mean, it was just from my perspective, it listed a whole bunch of accounts that it said were bots, but actually it only took like a couple of minutes to work out that they were real people. They were just avid Depp fans. So that part of the counterclaim was, that part of Amber's claim against Depp was thrown out. And that kind of meant that at the trial itself, the whole issue of bots couldn't be discussed at all, because it had already been kind of decided in Depp's favor. So what we did was we went back to one of Amber's computer experts who'd collected this like huge database of tweets that had been posted against Amber Heard in the run-up to the trial, but which had never really been analysed. And we took that database and gave it to two like amazing data scientists and experts in disinformation, and they came back with effectively a conclusion that there was significant inauthentic activity within that database.
And some of those statistics about that inauthentic activity are just mind-boggling, even for people like me who aren't the most technologically literate. So just one example was an account that had posted something, and a lot of these messages included the phrase "Amber is not a victim."
Yeah.
And in one of these, it was an account with very, very few followers, but this tweet goes out. It's retweeted 22,000 times.
Yeah.
There are only 11 direct replies to it. So the retweets are way out of proportion to the number of people who would usually be able to see that tweet. So immediately you think, well, of course, something else is at play here. So that's what was happening.
Yeah. And the other kind of shocking thing was that these examples were kind of not focused in one country. We found bot networks, evidence of bot networks in Thailand, in Spain, coming out of the Middle East. So it seemed, either it seems like lots of people were trying to use inauthentic means to troll Amber, or one person with quite a lot of resources was doing the same thing.
How easy is it to follow the trail of that kind of tweets and those kind of trolling? So can you not, just through the use of data going backwards, actually find out, just in that example of that account, just where it comes from, what the IP address is, who it is? Is it not possible to get there?
It's just not possible. No, and it's getting harder and harder. So only Twitter and these social media networks have the IP address and the email address that was used to sign up to the account. We don't have any of that. But even more worryingly, social media owners like Elon Musk have really clamped down on the amount that journalists like me and researchers, disinformation researchers, can get data from the platform to work out what is going on. So identifying a bot is pretty hard. But then if you do identifying who commissioned it is really hard. And the only way that we really managed to do it in this case was when the bots had been sloppy, when they hadn't deleted previous information that gave us clues about who had commissioned them.
So explain that a little bit more.
So usually in bot campaigns, if you use accounts that have already been created, you try and wipe those accounts clean so that you're starting off with bots that accounts that look like they've got no history. So what we found this very interesting bunch of pro Johnny Depp Twitter accounts online, and that they're tweeting today. You can see that they tweet 20 times a day about Johnny Depp. They got pictures of Johnny Depp everywhere. They hate Amber Heard, pretty standard for Johnny Depp fans, except that if you plug in their details into the Wayback Machine, which is an internet website that kind of saves old copies of web pages, you can see that they've deleted hundreds of other tweets, and those tweets are all in Arabic, not English, and they don't have anything to do with Depp or any other celebrity. They're all praising Saudi Arabia or its ruler, Mohammed bin Salman. And that's really interesting because Saudi has this very storied history in terms of using bots to support its regime and disparage its enemies. It's what happened after the Khashoggi murder. All these Twitter accounts came online and said, "Oh, Saudi has nothing to do with it." And we took these Johnny Depp tweets to two experts in Saudi and Middle Eastern disinformation, and they said that the history suggests that these Johnny Depp accounts were once part of the Saudi government bot army. Why
would Saudi Arabia take an interest in a case between two Hollywood stars?
That's literally what I asked, right? It's the obvious question. But then you start looking at it and you're like, oh, okay, so Johnny Depp's last two movies have been financed by millions of dollars of Saudi money. And then you look further and you're like, he's been in this country maybe 6 or 7 times in the last 18 months. Film festivals, but also tourism trips. And then we spoke to this guy called Bradley Hope, who's this brilliant writer and author of a book about MBS. And Bradley tells us that this kind of bizarre like bromance has emerged between Johnny Depp and MBS himself. Like they are actually friends now. Johnny Depp goes to stay on his yacht, like in his mountain like villa. It's a very bizarre situation, but it does seem, I should say the Saudi government, the embassy didn't respond to requests for comment, but it does seem like they had like means, motive and opportunity to help Depp online.
I think anybody who even had a kind of a passing glance at the cases between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard would say that there was quite a lot that came back at Johnny Depp from Amber Heard's camp. So is this investigating that too?
To an extent, I mean, I didn't. So I think it's definitely important to recognize that this was a sort of complex matrix of stuff that was happening online. So like in the first, like even if you discover that bots and trolls were being used, that doesn't mean that they were the whole thing. Like there are thousands upon thousands of Johnny Depp supporters, real life Johnny Depp supporters, who took to social media to defend the person that they kind of revered. And Amber's fans did the same thing as well. And there was a lot of hatred, definitely, on both sides. I would say, though, that there is some kind of quite persuasive analysis to suggest that the amount of hate was primarily going against Amber. So, for instance, I think that there were like, between 2018 and 2022, there were 800,000 tweets that used the hashtag Amber Heard is an abuser. And there were only 15,000 tweets that used the hashtag Johnny Depp is an abuser, even though he was the one being accused of abuse.
And of course, what's really important in any case such as this is that a jury, because it was a jury case in America, is not swayed by information that is swirling all around them. And the important point to note in the case was that the jury wasn't sequestered. And that means that they didn't have to all just stay in a motel together and hand over their mobile phones. So what on earth could be done in future cases to control what seems to be a very out of control element of society and information?
I mean, I think in a narrow answer to your question would be like to be more careful about whether or not to sequester a jury in a case like this, where there's such a huge amount of online interest. But I think it kind of speaks also to like a broader point, which is something that I've looked at in previous investigations, which is that sometimes our institutions in this country, whether it's the police or the legal service, are sort of one or two steps behind where technology is. And it would be nice if they caught up, because then they might be able to kind of predict how some of this is going to play out.
How much would it cost to employ somebody on a troll farm to do some serious trolling against somebody you didn't particularly like?
Yeah, is asking for a friend.
Very much so.
Not much is the answer. Like, I think that you could definitely buy some bots, some unsophisticated bots for like tens of pounds rather than hundreds of pounds, and you could have some trolls thrown in. You know, you're talking thousands of pounds rather, you know, you're not talking like 50 or 100,000 pounds. You're talking maybe 10,000 pounds max. And
what is the process that then happens? I mean, we talk about bots. I don't really know what that means. Is it just a kind of algorithm? Are you just pressing a key on a keypad and off it all goes?
It kind of depends on where. So you can go online now and you can pay £20 to buy a certain number of Twitter accounts. And, then you can use those accounts to post whatever you want manually. So that's the kind of the base level. That's the easy stuff. If you wanted to go to like a digital PR operator, like company, they might have contacts in Mexico or in Israel that they could talk to that would do a sort of more sophisticated operation for you. So we spoke during the podcast to the founder of a non-profit called Forbidden Stories, who had kind of spearheaded this big investigation into this disinformation unit called Team Jorge in Israel. Team Jorge have this software, like it would be like I'm sitting in front of this computer screen right now. Team Jorge would be able to say, okay, so you want this message to go out over 2,000 accounts. We've got those accounts. We can just have to press a button and they'll be able to kind of put out the message. They've already got biographies. They've already got backgrounds, pictures. They're just ready to go.
It's terrifying then, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think it is pretty terrifying because it's really easy to do and it happens a lot. And no one really knows, like, it's only when there's a leak or an investigation where, like, examples of it come out. But it makes you think to yourself, well, like, I'm seeing all this stuff on social media. I consume news in a particular way. Am I being manipulated?
Well, we all are, aren't we? So we just need to kind of check in with ourselves every time we read something. The key players, though, in this story, presumably you've contacted both parties, made them aware of this podcast, etc., etc. The response has been what from Johnny Depp's camp?
Neither Johnny Depp nor the Saudis wanted to comment. We did have a response from Adam Waldman, who's this controversial lawyer for Johnny Depp. He actually got kicked off the case for leaking material to the press. He didn't answer our questions, but he posted little snippets of them online, which in my mind was a kind of clear invitation to, like, the Depp army to respond to us.
Okay.
Yeah, to pile on.
And has there been a pile-on?
Yeah,
yet?
totally.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about the pile-on is that it's obviously, like, directed at me because I did the podcast, but any and this is just like a kind of, you know, an observation, but any female journalist or commentator who has said, oh, I'm looking forward to this is an important investigation, has received a lot more abuse than the equivalent male commentator saying the same thing.
Well, it's an interesting point that you make right at the beginning, actually, of the podcast, just about the different reaction that there was to Amber Heard and her career and her work opportunities and Johnny Depp. And she lost a substantial contract at L'Oreal, and many people are still wearing Sauvage as the perfume that Johnny Depp still advertises, and he didn't lose that contract at all.
Yeah.
So what do we take from that?
I mean, I don't think that we can't get away from the fact that he won a court case and it was a jury court case, and to an extent you have to respect that decision. So if you're a Depp fan, or even if you just kind of believe generally in jury trials in the US, then you could say to yourself, well, he's been exonerated, so all power to him. But it's always been a really worrying case, this, because he wasn't exonerated in the UK, and a judge really kind of categorically went through the evidence that led him to believe that Depp had abused Amber Heard. So I don't know what I think that there's always been a big power imbalance in Hollywood and among Hollywood stars, and this is probably a representation of it.
Yeah, I think you could probably, we won't include this in the recording, but you could just not wear Sauvage in this country and you could put it on when you get to America if you want to stand by the letter of the law.
Exactly. I think
lovely, thank you.